My name is Chester Thompson. I am 59 years old, and as I lay on that cold marble floor staring up at the crystal chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, I could hear the laughter echoing around me. My back was screaming in pain. My son's bride stood over me, her lips curled into a smirk. "Stay with the help," she said. "That is where you belong." Then a voice cut through the noise, a man from the head table trembling. "Sir, is that you? Before I tell you what happened next, let me know in the comments if you have ever been judged by your appearance. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me." What that man said next changed everything in that room. I was born in 1966 in a small coal mining town called Beckley, West Virginia. My father worked underground in the mines, breathing in that black dust every single day for 23 years. My mother worked at the local laundromat pressing shirts and folding sheets for families who had more than we ever did. There were 5 of us kids, and I was right in the middle. Third born, hand-me-down clothes, shared bedrooms, 1 bathroom for 7 people. But let me tell you something. We were poor in money, but we were rich in love. My mother could stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 meals. My father never missed a single one of my baseball games, even when he came straight from the mines with coal dust still in the creases of his face. Every Sunday we gathered around the kitchen table, and my father would say the same thing. A man's worth is not in his wallet, but in his word. I did not understand what that meant when I was young, but I do now. My father died when I was 16, black lung disease. They call it coal workers' pneumoconiosis, but it is really just the mines killing you slowly from the inside out. I remember standing at his grave, watching my mother cry and making a promise to myself. I would take care of this family, no matter what. I dropped out of high school the next week, got a job at the local hardware store, worked double shifts, gave every penny to my mother. My younger siblings finished school because I did not, and I never once regretted that decision. When I was 22 years old, I knew I had to leave Beckley. There was nothing there for me anymore. My mother had passed. My siblings had scattered to different states. So I packed a single bag, took a Greyhound bus, and landed in Washington, D.C. with $47 in my pocket and no idea what I was going to do next. I walked into Georgetown University 3 days later, not as a student, but as a job applicant. They were hiring custodians, janitors, the people who clean the toilets and mop the floors and empty the trash cans while brilliant young minds walk past without even seeing them. I got the job, and I stayed in that job for 34 years. Let me tell you what those 34 years looked like. I woke up at 4:30 every morning. I rode the bus for 45 minutes. I clocked in at 6. I cleaned classrooms, laboratories, libraries, dormitories, and administrative offices. I fixed leaky faucets and flickering lights and broken door handles. I shoveled snow in the winter and raked leaves in the fall. I was invisible to most people, and that was fine with me. But here is what nobody knew. Every night after my shift ended, I would stay late in the library, not to clean, but to read. The students would leave their textbooks behind their notes scattered on tables, their highlighters forgotten between pages. And I would sit there in the quiet, teaching myself everything they were learning in their expensive classes. Finance, economics, investment strategies, the stock market. I started investing when I was 28 years old, $500. That was everything I had saved over 6 years of working. I put it all into a company I believed in, and then I did it again, and again, and again. I never sold. I just kept buying. I kept reading. I kept learning. Nobody at Georgetown knew that the janitor mopping their floors was building a fortune in the stock market, and I wanted to keep it that way. In 1992, I met a woman named Linda at a small church near my apartment. She was a nurse at the local hospital. Kind eyes, gentle hands, a laugh that sounded like music. She didn't care that I was a custodian. She didn't care that I lived in a tiny apartment with secondhand furniture. She saw me, the real me, and I fell in love with her completely. We got married in 1993, a small ceremony, 40 people. My best friend Tom was my best man. Linda wore a dress she bought at a thrift store and altered herself. We danced our first dance to a song playing from a portable radio. It was the happiest day of my life. Our son Marcus was born in 1995. I remember holding him for the first time, this tiny, perfect human being, and feeling a weight of responsibility I had never felt before. I wanted to give him everything, but I also wanted to teach him what my father taught me, that a man's worth is not measured by his possessions. So we raised Marcus simply. We lived in a small apartment. We took the bus. We packed lunches instead of eating out. Linda knew I was investing, but I never told her how much. I did not want the money to change us. I did not want it to change Marcus. Linda passed away in 2010, breast cancer. She fought for 2 years before her body gave up. I held her hand in the hospital room as she took her last breath. And then I went home to our 15-year-old son and held him while he cried. That was the hardest year of my life. I kept working. I kept investing. By 2020, after 32 years of quiet, disciplined investing, my portfolio was worth $14 million. I could have retired to a mansion. I could have bought luxury cars and expensive suits, but I did not. I stayed in my small house. I drove my 2008 Ford pickup truck. I wore the same clothes I'd worn for years. I finally retired in 2022, 34 years at Georgetown. The students and professors who knew me called me Mr. Chester. They would wave when they saw me. They would ask about my day. Some of them even brought me coffee or donuts. I was a fixture, a familiar face, a good man who did honest work. Nobody knew I was worth more than most of them would ever see in their lifetimes. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But there was one student, one young man who I helped more than the others. And I had no idea that he would reappear in my life decades later at the worst possible moment and change everything. Marcus was a good boy when he was young. He used to come to the campus after school and wait for me to finish my shift. He would sit in the library doing his homework while I mopped the floors around him. The students would smile at him sometimes, even help him with his math problems. He was proud of me then. He used to tell his teachers that his dad worked at a famous university. He did not say I was a janitor. He just said I worked there. And that was enough. When Linda died, something in Marcus hardened. He did not cry as much as I expected. He just got quiet, distant. He threw himself into his studies like his life depended on it. I thought it was his way of grieving. I thought he would come back to me eventually. He got a scholarship to Georgetown, full ride. Can you imagine that my son walking the same halls I had cleaned for decades? I was so proud of him. But that pride turned to confusion and then to pain as I watched him change. In his freshman year, Marcus started avoiding me on campus. At first I thought it was just coincidence. Maybe he was busy with classes. Maybe he was making friends. But then I noticed the pattern. When he saw me pushing my cart down the hallway, he would turn the other way. When I waved, he pretended not to see me. When I called out his name, he walked faster. I asked him about it once, just once. He was home for Thanksgiving break and we were sitting at the kitchen table eating leftovers. I said, "Marcus, it feels like you are avoiding me at school. Is everything okay?" He didn't look at me. He just stared at his plate and said, "Dad, it is complicated. The people I hang out with, they do not understand. They come from different backgrounds. Their parents are lawyers and doctors and executives. I just do not want to explain." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. My own son was ashamed of me, ashamed of what I did for a living, ashamed of the same job that put food on our table and paid for his clothes and kept a roof over his head. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and finished my dinner in silence. What could I say? I could have told him about the money. I could have told him that his janitor father was worth millions, but that would have defeated the whole purpose. I wanted Marcus to build his own life, to earn his own success, to understand the value of hard work. Telling him about my wealth would have destroyed all of that. Marcus graduated with honors, finance degree. He got a job at a big investment firm in New York City, fancy office in Manhattan, 6-figure salary. I was proud of him, but the distance between us only grew. He called less often, visited even less. When he did call, the conversations were short and surface level. "How are you, Dad?" "I'm fine. Work is busy. Talk soon." Click. I kept sending him money every month, just a few $100s. I told him it was my pension, my retirement savings. He probably thought I was scraping by. He had no idea. In 2023, Marcus called to tell me he was getting married. Her name was Brittany. He met her at some networking event in New York. Her father was Harold Kensington, the owner of a major real estate development company. Old money, Ivy League education, country club memberships, everything Marcus thought he wanted to be. I asked to meet her. Marcus hesitated. He said, "Dad, Brittany is really busy. She's planning the wedding, maybe at the ceremony." I asked if I could come visit, see his apartment, take them both to dinner. He said it was not a good time, maybe later. Later never came. When the wedding invitation arrived in the mail, I opened it with shaking hands. The envelope was thick and creamy, the kind of paper that costs more than my monthly grocery bill. The invitation was embossed in gold. The wedding would be held at the Ritz-Carlton in Manhattan, black tie required. But what hurt the most was my name on the guest list, Chester Thompson, not father of the groom, just Chester Thompson, listed under extended family. My own son had demoted me to a distant relative. I sat in my kitchen for a long time that night, staring at the invitation. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to call Marcus and demand an explanation, but in the end I did what fathers do. I decided to go anyway, because no matter how much it hurt, Marcus was still my son, and I was not going to miss his wedding. I had no idea what was waiting for me. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5. I could not sleep much the night before. Too many thoughts running through my head, too many memories, too much hurt. I showered and shaved and put on the suit I had bought specially for the occasion. It was a simple black suit from a department store, $200. It fit well enough, but it was nothing compared to what the other guests would be wearing. I knew that. I accepted it. I drove from D.C. to New York City in my old pickup truck. 4.5 hours on the road, just me and my thoughts and the radio playing old country songs. I thought about Linda. What would she think if she could see us now? What would she say to Marcus? I also brought 2 things with me. The first was my grandfather's pocket watch, solid gold, engraved on the back with our family name. It had been passed down through 4 generations of Thompson men, and now it was Marcus's turn to carry it. The second was a sealed envelope. Nobody knew what was inside, not even Marcus. When I pulled into the Ritz-Carlton parking lot, I felt out of place immediately. Valets in crisp uniforms were parking Bentleys and Mercedes and Teslas. My Ford pickup looked like a farm truck that had gotten lost on its way to the country fair. The valet who took my keys gave me a look like he was not sure if I was a guest or someone who had made a wrong turn. I walked into the lobby and my breath caught in my throat. I had never seen anything so luxurious in my entire life. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. The floors were polished marble so shiny I could see my reflection. Fresh flowers everywhere arranged in vases that probably cost more than my truck. Staff members in immaculate uniforms moved silently through the space attending to guests who looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. And then there were the guests themselves. The women wore designer gowns, diamonds glittering at their throats and wrists. The men wore tuxedos that fit them like second skins, their shoes polished to mirrors, their watches catching the light. They moved through the space with the easy confidence of people who belonged here. People who had always belonged here. I tugged at my suit jacket, suddenly very aware of how cheap it looked, how out of place I was. I approached the reception desk and gave my name. The woman behind the counter looked at my invitation, then looked at me, then looked at the invitation again. Like she was trying to figure out how someone like me had ended up with an invitation like this. "You are with the Thompson-Kensington wedding?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I am the groom's father." Her eyebrows went up just a fraction, just enough for me to notice. She checked something on her computer, printed out a seating card, and handed it to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Table 17, she said, "near the service entrance." I found the ballroom and walked inside. It was even more spectacular than the lobby. Soaring ceilings painted with scenes from Greek mythology, enormous windows draped in silk curtains, tables covered in white linen centered with elaborate floral arrangements. An orchestra was setting up in the corner. Ice sculptures, a champagne fountain, more crystal, more gold, more everything. I looked for table 17. It was exactly where the receptionist said it would be. The very back of the room. Right next to the door where the servers came in and out of the kitchen. The table was smaller than the others. The flowers were less impressive. The chairs were slightly different, like they had been borrowed from another event. I sat down and looked around at my table mates. A man in a rumpled suit who turned out to be the florist assistant. A woman who was apparently the maid of honor's estranged cousin. 2 people who worked at the venue and had been invited to fill empty seats. These were the people I had been grouped with. The extras, the afterthoughts. I told myself it didn't matter. I was here for Marcus, not for the fancy tables or the important guests, but it still stung. Before the ceremony began, I decided to find Marcus. I wanted to give him the pocket watch. I wanted to see him before he walked down the aisle. I wanted to tell him I loved him, even if he was ashamed of me. I found the groomsmen room after asking 3 different staff members for directions. When I knocked on the door, Marcus opened it. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His hair was styled. His shoes gleamed. He looked like a stranger. "Dad," he said, his voice surprised. "What are you doing here? I mean, back here." "I just wanted to see you before the ceremony," I said, "and to give you something." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pocket watch. I held it out to him. "This was your great-great-grandfather's," I said. "It has been passed down through every generation of Thompson men. Now it is yours." Marcus took the watch. He glanced at it briefly, turned it over once, then slipped it into his pocket without really looking at it. "Thanks, Dad," he said. "I appreciate it." Before I could say anything else, the door opened wider and a woman appeared behind Marcus. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers are beautiful. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, a wedding dress that looked like it cost more than my house. This was Brittany, my son's bride. She looked at me. Her eyes traveled from my face to my suit to my shoes and back up again. I watched her expression change from confusion to recognition to something that looked a lot like disgust. "Marcus," she said, her voice cool. "Who is this?" "This is Chester," Marcus said. "He is a family friend. Not your father, not my dad. Just Chester, a family friend." I felt something crack inside my chest. Brittany did not extend her hand. She did not smile. She just looked at me like I was something unpleasant she had found on the bottom of her shoe. "Nice to meet you," she said flatly. Then she turned to Marcus and whispered something in his ear. I heard fragments of it. "Why did you invite him? Embarrassing. Important people here." Marcus looked at the floor. He did not defend me. He did not correct her. He just stood there. "I should get back to my table," I said quietly. "Congratulations to you both." I walked away before they could see the tears in my eyes. The ceremony was beautiful. I will give them that. The string quartet played Pachelbel. The bridesmaids floated down the aisle in matching lavender gowns. Brittany looked radiant like a princess from a fairy tale. And Marcus, my son, stood at the altar and watched her approach with a smile on his face. I sat in the back row, craning my neck to see around the enormous hat of the woman in front of me. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to this union, I stayed silent. What could I have said? I object because my son is marrying someone who looks at his father like garbage. I object because I raised him better than this. No, I kept quiet. I watched Marcus say his vows. I watched them exchange rings. I watched them kiss. And when everyone applauded, I applauded too, because despite everything, I still loved my son. I still wanted him to be happy. The reception began immediately after. Guests migrated to the ballroom, filling the tables, accepting champagne from passing servers. I returned to table 17 and took my seat among the misfits and the forgotten. The MC announced the entrance of the wedding party. Brittany and Marcus swept into thunderous applause, looking like the perfect couple. Brittany's parents followed. Her father, Harold Kensington, was a tall man in his late 50s with silver hair and a commanding presence. Her mother, Margaret, was elegant and poised, her jewelry probably worth more than some people's houses. The MC called for the parents to come forward and give speeches. Harold spoke first. He talked about what a wonderful daughter Brittany was, how proud he was, how lucky Marcus was to be joining their family. Margaret said a few words about love and partnership and the importance of supporting each other. Then the MC asked about the groom's parents. I stood up. Here I called out, "I'm right here." Marcus's face went pale. He shook his head almost imperceptibly. Sat down, his eyes seemed to say, "Please, not now." But before I could take a single step toward the stage, Marcus spoke into the microphone. "My mother passed away several years ago," he said, "and my father unfortunately could not be here today. But I know they would both be proud." I stood there frozen. My legs would not move. My voice would not come. My father was right there, right in the room. And my son had just told everyone he could not make it. I sat back down slowly. The people at my table avoided looking at me. They had heard. They knew. The woman next to me, the florist's assistant, reached over and patted my hand gently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The reception continued. Dinner was served. Prime rib and lobster tail and roasted vegetables. I could barely taste any of it. Every bite felt like sawdust in my mouth. I watched Marcus and Brittany at their table, laughing and drinking and accepting congratulations. My son never once looked in my direction. After dinner, the dancing began. I sat at my table and watched couples twirl across the floor. I thought about Linda, about our wedding, about dancing with her in the church basement while our friends and family clapped along. That felt like a lifetime ago. I needed some air. I excused myself and walked to the restroom, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror, an old man in a cheap suit, a father whose son was ashamed of him. What was I doing here? But I didn't leave, because somewhere deep down I still had hope. Maybe Marcus would come find me. Maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would remember who he was and where he came from. I walked back to the ballroom. As I approached my table, I saw Brittany standing nearby talking to a group of her friends. She saw me coming. Her eyes narrowed. I pulled out my chair and started to sit down. That is when she did it. In one swift motion, Brittany reached over and yanked the chair out from under me. I fell. Hard. My back hit the marble floor with a sickening thud. My elbow cracked against the leg of the table. Glasses toppled over. A plate crashed to the ground and shattered. For a moment, everything went silent. Then Brittany laughed, and her friends laughed with her. "Stay with the help," Brittany said loudly. "That is where you belong." More laughter rippled through the nearby tables. People were staring. Some were smirking. Some looked away uncomfortably. But nobody helped me. Nobody said a word. I lay there on that cold marble floor, pain radiating through my body, humiliation burning through my soul. I could see Marcus across the room. He was frozen, his face red, his hands clenched, but he didn't move. He didn't come to help his father. A server rushed over and knelt beside me. "Sir, are you okay? Let me help you up." I grabbed his arm and slowly, painfully got to my feet. My back was screaming. My elbow was throbbing. But the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt inside. Brittany had already turned back to her friends, dismissing me completely. The help had been dealt with. The entertainment was over. And then a voice. "Sir." It came from the head table. A man had stood up, Harold Kensington, Brittany's father. He was staring at me with an expression I could not read. His face had gone white. His hands were trembling. "Sir," he said again, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Is that you, Mr. Chester?" Everything stopped. Harold Kensington walked toward me. Not walked, almost ran. He pushed past servers and guests, knocking a champagne glass out of someone's hand without even noticing. His eyes never left my face. "Mr. Chester," he said again, his voice cracking. "Mr. Chester Thompson, it is you, is it not?" I stared at him, tried to place his face. There was something familiar about his eyes, about the way he held himself, but I could not quite. And then it hit me. Harry. The entire room was watching now. Brittany had stopped laughing. Marcus was standing at his table, confusion written all over his face. Harold Kensington dropped to his knees in front of me, right there on the marble floor, in his $3,000 tuxedo, in front of every powerful person he knew. He grabbed my hands. "Mr. Chester, I cannot believe it is you. Let me tell you about Harry. In 1995, the same year my son Marcus was born, there was a young man at Georgetown University, a freshman on a scholarship. His name was Harry, though back then everyone called him by his full name, Harold. But he was not the Harold Kensington that people knew today. He was not a real estate tycoon. He was not worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was nobody. Harry came from a small town in Pennsylvania, coal country just like me. His father had been a steelworker until the mill closed. His mother cleaned houses. They had nothing. But Harry was smart, brilliant actually. He got a full scholarship to Georgetown based on his grades alone. But scholarships do not cover everything. They do not cover books. They do not cover food. They do not cover the little emergencies that pop up in life. Harry was struggling from the moment he arrived on campus. I noticed him the first week of school. He was studying in the library late at night, long after everyone else had gone. I was doing my rounds, emptying trash cans and mopping floors, and there he was, hunched over a textbook, stomach growling, too proud to admit he was hungry. I started leaving sandwiches in the maintenance closet near the library, ham and cheese on white bread, nothing fancy. I never told Harry they were for him. I just mentioned to him one night that there was extra food in there sometimes if he needed it. He needed it. Over the next 4 years, I watched Harry work harder than anyone I had ever seen. He studied until 2 in the morning. He took extra shifts at the campus bookstore. He tutored other students for a few dollars an hour. He was determined to make something of himself. Then in his junior year, disaster struck. Harry's father got sick. Cancer. The medical bills piled up. Harry's scholarship covered tuition, but it did not cover the $3,000 he suddenly owed for books and fees. The university gave him a deadline. Pay up or get out. I will never forget the night I found Harry crying in the library, sitting on the floor between the stacks, his head in his hands, sobbing like his heart was breaking, because it was. I sat down next to him. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there. And eventually he told me everything, about his father, about the money, about how close he was to losing everything he had worked for. The next morning I went to the financial aid office and paid Harry's outstanding balance, $3,000. I told them not to tell him who it was from. Just say it was an anonymous donor. Harry never found out. He graduated with honors. He went on to business school. He built an empire. And somewhere along the way he forgot about the skinny kid crying in the library and the janitor who sat beside him. Or so I thought. Now Harry was kneeling in front of me, tears streaming down his face. "It was you," he said. "I found out 10 years ago. I went through the old financial records trying to find my benefactor, trying to thank whoever saved my life. And I found a receipt with your name on it, Chester Thompson, the custodian. I tried to find you. I went back to Georgetown, but you had retired. I hired private investigators, but they could not locate you. I never stopped looking." He stood up and turned to face the crowd. Every single person in that ballroom was watching. Brittany looked like she was going to faint. Marcus had gone completely pale. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harold said, his voice strong now, "I need you all to listen to me. This man right here, Chester Thompson, he is the reason I'm standing before you today. 30 years ago, I was a broke scholarship student at Georgetown University. I had nothing. I was about to be expelled because I could not pay my fees. And this man, a custodian, a janitor, paid my tuition with his own money. Gasps rippled through the room. He never told me, Harold continued. He never asked for anything in return. He just did it because he saw a young man in trouble and he wanted to help. Everything I have built, my company, my wealth, my family, it all started because of him, because of this man. Harold turned to look at Brittany. His face hardened. And my daughter just pulled a chair out from under him. She told him to stay with the help. Brittany, do you have any idea what you have done? Brittany was crying now. Daddy, I did not know. I did not know who he was. Harold shook his head. It should not matter who he is. It should not matter if he is rich or poor. You do not treat people like that. Ever. He turned back to face the crowd. But there is more. Harold looked at me. Mr. Chester, forgive me for what I'm about to say, but these people need to know the truth. I nodded, confused. What more could there be? Mr. Chester Thompson is not just a kind man, Harold said. He is also one of the most successful investors I have ever encountered. While working as a custodian earning a modest salary, he quietly built a fortune through disciplined long-term investing. He is worth over $14 million, more than most of the people in this room. The silence was deafening, Harold continued. But he chose to live simply. He chose to drive an old truck and wear simple clothes, because he wanted to teach his son the value of hard work, the same values that helped me become who I am today. Harold pointed at Marcus. And you are his son, his only child. And you told everyone here that your father could not make it today. You lied. You were ashamed of him, ashamed of the man who sacrificed everything for you. Marcus was shaking. His face was wet with tears. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Brittany collapsed into a chair. Her perfect wedding, ruined, her perfect image shattered. Margaret, her mother, sat motionless, her face a mask of shock and shame. And me, I just stood there, a janitor in a cheap suit, a millionaire nobody knew about, a father whose secret had finally been revealed. The room was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. I cleared my throat. Harold, I said, I appreciate what you have done, but I did not come here for recognition. I turned to face the crowd. My legs were still shaking. My back still hurt from the fall, but my voice was steady. I did not come here to be praised or celebrated. I came here because my son was getting married. That is the only reason. I paused, looked around at all those wealthy faces staring at me, some with shock, some with shame, some with something that might have been respect. Yes, I was a custodian. I cleaned floors for 34 years. I scrubbed toilets and fixed light bulbs and emptied trash cans. And you know what? I was proud of that work every single day. I looked at Brittany, still crying in her chair. Young lady, you looked at me tonight and decided I was worthless. You decided that because of my suit and my job and my seat at the back of the room, I deserved to be humiliated. You did not know who I was. You did not know about the money or the investments or any of that. And you know what? It should not matter. Brittany flinched. What defines a man is not his bank account, I continued. It is not his job title or his car or the label on his suit. What defines a man is how he treats other people, especially the people he thinks are beneath him. I took a breath. When I was lying on that floor with everyone laughing, nobody helped me. Nobody stood up for me. Because in your eyes, I was nobody, a nuisance, entertainment for the elite. I shook my head slowly. That says nothing about me, but it says everything about you. Brittany was sobbing now. Deep, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Her perfect makeup was ruined. Her perfect day was ruined. And somewhere inside her, I hoped she was finally understanding what she had done. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope, the one I had been carrying since I left D.C. this morning, the one nobody knew about. Marcus, I said, I was going to give you this as a wedding gift. Marcus stepped forward, his face a mess of tears and confusion. I held up the envelope. Inside this envelope is a check for $500,000. I saved it for you, for your future, for your family. Marcus gasped. Dad, I did not know. I never knew you had. I raised my hand to stop him. I have conditions. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. This money is for you and your future children, I said. It is not for someone who thinks people like me should stay with the help. It is not for someone who would humiliate a stranger because he looked poor. It is not for someone who would mock an old man on the floor while everyone laughed. I set the envelope down on the nearest table. You need to decide, son. What kind of man do you want to be, and who do you want to spend your life with? Marcus stared at me. Then he turned to look at Brittany. For a long moment, he did not move. I could see the battle happening behind his eyes, the life he thought he wanted versus the values he was raised with, the woman he was supposed to marry versus the father he had abandoned. Then Marcus took off his wedding ring. He held it in his palm for a moment, staring at it. Then he set it down on the table right next to the envelope. "Brittany," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I loved you, or I thought I did." Brittany looked up at him, mascara streaking down her face. "Marcus, please. I'm sorry, I did not know." Marcus shook his head. "That is exactly the problem. You did not know, but you still treated him like he was nothing, like he was trash." He stepped back from her. "A good person would not do that to anyone, rich or poor, known or unknown. It does not matter. And you did it to my father." Brittany reached for him, but Marcus pulled away. "I cannot marry someone who would do that," he said. "I cannot build a life with someone who has that kind of cruelty in her heart." He turned and walked toward me. "Dad, son." He stopped in front of me. His eyes were red. His perfect tuxedo was wrinkled. He looked nothing like the polished young executive who had denied my existence a few hours ago. He looked like my boy again. The kid who used to wait for me in the library after school. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked. I pulled him into a hug, held him tight, felt his shoulders shaking as he cried. "I already have," I said. "I have been waiting for you to come back to me, son. I have been waiting a long time." Harold Kensington approached us. His eyes were shining with unshed tears. "Mr. Chester," he said, "I owe you everything. I'm so sorry for what my daughter did tonight. If there is anything I can do, anything at all." I released Marcus and looked at Harold. "Teach your daughter," I said. "Teach her that money is not everything. Teach her that character matters more than status. That is all I ask." Harold nodded slowly. He turned to look at Brittany, still crying alone at her table. None of her friends had gone to comfort her. None of the guests were rushing to her side. In one night she had lost her groom, her dignity, and the respect of everyone who mattered. "I will," Harold said quietly. "I should have done a better job a long time ago. That failure is on me." Guests began filtering out of the ballroom. The wedding was over. The party was canceled. Servers stood around awkwardly, not sure what to do. The orchestra had stopped playing. One by one, people approached me on their way out. Some shook my hand. Some apologized for not helping when I fell. Some simply nodded with something like respect in their eyes. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes stopped in front of me. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I was at Georgetown in 1982. I remember you. You fixed the heater in my dormitory when it broke in the middle of February. You stayed until midnight to make sure we would not freeze. I never forgot that kindness." I smiled. "Just doing my job, ma'am." She squeezed my hand. "No, you were doing much more than that. Marcus and I left the Ritz-Carlton together. We walked out through the grand lobby, past the crystal chandeliers and the marble floors, and the staff members who had looked at me with such suspicion earlier. They did not look at me that way anymore. My truck was waiting in the parking lot. The valet had parked it way in the back, probably embarrassed to have such an old vehicle among all the luxury cars. But when we reached it, Marcus stopped. "I remember this truck," he said. "Mom and you used to pick me up from school in it. I would sit in the middle between you two. We would sing along to the radio." "We did," I said. "Those were good times." Marcus ran his hand along the hood. "I forgot so many things, Dad. I forgot who I was, who we were." We climbed into the truck. I started the engine and it rumbled to life like it had 1,000 times before. Reliable, steady, unpretentious, everything I tried to be. We drove in silence for the first hour. The Manhattan skyline faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the long stretch of highway leading south. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Dad, why did you never tell me about the money?" I kept my eyes on the road, because I wanted you to earn your own success. I wanted you to understand that hard work matters, that character matters. If you had grown up knowing we were wealthy, you might have turned out differently." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I turned out badly anyway." "No," I said. "You made mistakes, big ones, but you are not a bad person. You lost your way, that is all. A lot of young people do." I glanced over at him. "Your mother and I always believed in you. We still do. I still do." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to change, Dad. I do not know exactly how yet, but I'm going to be different, better." I nodded. That is all anyone can ask for. The next 3 hours of driving were different from any time Marcus and I had spent together in years. We talked about everything, about Linda and how much we both missed her, about my years at Georgetown and the students I had helped, about Marcus's job in New York and how empty it made him feel despite all the success. We talked about Brittany, about how Marcus had been seduced by the idea of her life, her family, her connections, about how he had convinced himself that marrying her was the smart move even when something deep inside him knew it was wrong. And we talked about the future. Marcus told me he was going to quit his job, move back to D.C., start over, find work that actually meant something. I told him about my investing, about the strategies I had used over the decades, about the principles my father had taught me about patience and discipline and playing the long game, By the time we reached my house, the sun was starting to rise. Pink and orange lights spread across the sky. We sat in the driveway for a few minutes, watching it. "This house," Marcus said, looking at my modest home. "You could afford a mansion. Why did you stay here?" "Because this is where your mother and I built our life," I said. "This is where we raised you. Every room has memories. Why would I want to leave that behind for some big empty palace?" Marcus smiled. That was the first real smile I had seen from him in years. "I get it now," he said. "I finally get it." Over the next few weeks, Marcus did exactly what he said he would. He quit his job at the investment firm. He moved back to D.C. and found a small apartment near my house. He got a job at a local nonprofit that helped young people from disadvantaged backgrounds get into college. The pay was a fraction of what he had been making in New York, but he didn't care. He visited me every Sunday. We would have dinner together, watch football, talk about life. Sometimes we would just sit on the porch in comfortable silence, the way fathers and sons are supposed to. He called me every week, sometimes more. Not quick, distracted calls like before, real conversations. "How was your day, Dad? What are you reading? Did you catch the game last night?" My son came home to me. 3 months after the wedding, I made good on my promise. I gave Marcus the $500,000, but we set it up differently now. Put it in a trust. Part of it for his future children's education, part of it for the nonprofit he was working with, part of it as a safety net managed by a financial advisor I trusted so that Marcus could not access it all at once. It was not about the money anymore. It was about building something meaningful. Harold Kensington reached out to me a few times. He wanted to repay me for what I had done all those years ago. He offered to donate to any charity I chose. He offered to name a scholarship after me at Georgetown. I told him the same thing every time. Just be a good man. Help people when you can. That is payment enough. As for Brittany, I heard through Harold that she had gone to therapy, that she was working on herself, that she had started volunteering at a shelter for homeless families, trying to understand the lives of people she had always dismissed. I do not know if she will ever truly change, but at least she is trying. And maybe that is something. 1 year after that disastrous wedding, I was sitting on my front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. Marcus was inside setting the table for dinner. He was bringing someone to meet me today, a woman named Sarah. She was a teacher at an elementary school. Marcus met her through his nonprofit work. He said she was kind and funny and did not care about money or status at all. He said she reminded him of his mother. I was nervous to meet her, but it was a good nervous, the kind of nervous that comes with hope. My old dog, a gray muzzled mutt I had rescued from a shelter years ago, lay at my feet. I scratched behind his ears and thought about everything that had happened. When I hit that marble floor at the Ritz-Carlton, I thought it was the worst moment of my life, lying there humiliated, watching my own son pretend I did not exist. I thought my heart was going to break in two. But looking back now, I realized that fall was the best thing that ever happened to me. It broke something loose, shattered the walls that had grown between me and Marcus, exposed the truth that needed to be seen. Sometimes you have to fall in front of everyone to finally stand up for yourself. Sometimes the people who look down on you are the ones who end up looking up. I do not know what Brittany is doing now. I do not need to know. She is on her own journey dealing with her own demons. I wish her well, but she is not my concern anymore. What I know is this: my son came home. After years of distance, after years of silence, after years of shame and avoidance, he came back to me. He found his way. And that is worth more than any $1 million. The screen door opened behind me. Marcus stepped out onto the porch. "Dad, dinner is almost ready. Sarah will be here in about 10 minutes. I nodded and started to get up. Marcus reached out a hand to help me. I took it, and he pulled me to my feet. "Thanks, son. Always, Dad." We stood there for a moment looking at the sunset together. "I love you, Dad," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." I put my arm around his shoulders. "I love you too, son." I never stopped. And that is my story. That is what happened when I went to my son's wedding and his bride pulled my chair out from under me. To anyone watching this, I want you to think about something. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance, by their clothes or their job or the car they drive? Have you ever looked down on someone because they seem to be less than you? We all have. It is human nature, but that does not make it right. The next time you see someone who looks like they do not belong, remember my story. Remember that you do not know their journey. You do not know what they have overcome or what they have built or who they have helped along the way. You do not know their worth. Because a man's worth is not in his wallet. It is in his word. It is in his character. It is in how he treats the people he thinks nobody is watching. That is what my father taught me, and that is what I finally taught my son. Let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever been judged unfairly, or have you done the judging yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do. I have more stories to tell, and I would love for you to be here when I tell them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying until the end. I appreciate every single one of you. Take care of yourselves. Be kind to each other. And remember, the way you treat people when you think nobody is watching says everything about who you really are. Until next time.